Yet let me ask you, my brothers and sisters, who told you that you must carry it all alone? Who whispered into your ear that your value is measured by your capacity to endure burdens in silence? In this age of endless striving, we have been subtly conditioned to believe that dependence is weakness, that vulnerability is defeat, and that asking for help is somehow a betrayal of our dignity. Offense of, but I submit to you today that this is not strength. It is quiet suffering disguised as heroism. You were never meant to carry it all alone. Even the greatest of prophets, the strongest of kings, and the wisest of sages knew the limits of human capacity. Moses had Aaron. David cried out to God in anguish. Even Christ, on the eve of crucifixion, prayed in Gethsemane with great drops of blood falling like sweat. Of what makes you believe that your strength must be enough when even the Son of Man relied on the Father? The myth of self-sufficiency is one of the most destructive lies of our time. It feeds the ego while starving the soul. It does not the offense, and in the silence of the night, when the applause has faded and the masks come off, many of the offense of many are left crushed under weight they were never meant to bear. We live in a culture obsessed with control. We want to plan every outcome, predict every turn, and orchestrate every detail of life. But what we call planning, God sometimes calls pride. It does not come the offense of. There is a difference between stewardship and obsession. You can be diligent and still dependent. The offense of, you can be responsible and still relinquish control to the divine. But you must decide who is the true captain of your ship. When you are obsessed with controlling every wave, every wind recurrent, you become a slave to anxiety. But when you trust the one who created the seas, you begin to sail with a different kind of peace. There is power in divine delegation. The offense of letting God take over your worries is not an act of resignation. It is an act of revelation. It is a recognition that your vision, no matter how broad, is limited. Your strength, no matter how great, is finite. And your understanding, no matter how brilliant, is partial. From the offense of, we must humble ourselves enough to say, I do not know what tomorrow holds, but I trust the one who holds it. This is not to say that you are exempt from action. No, life demands effort, strategy, and boldness. But effort must be rooted in trust, not the offense of, not in fear. Action must be infused with faith, not panic. When you let God take over, become offensive, you don't stop moving. You simply stop striving in vain. You begin to walk not with hurried desperation, but with divine coordination. Your movements are no longer dictated by dread, but by discernment. You shift from running in circles to walking in purpose. And let me speak to those of you who lie awake at night, rehearsing every problem, every failure, every worst case scenario in your mind like a broken record. Worry, my friends, is the mind's way of worshipping fear. It is your spirit bowing before a false altar. But when you let take over your worries, you take that same energy and redirect it toward hope. You say, yes, the fence of, I see the mountain, but I also believe in the mover of mountains. You were not created to live in survival mode. You were not fashioned in the image of God only to walk through life like an orphan with no direction. When you forget who your source is, you begin to mistake pressure for purpose. You start thinking that because something is heavy, it must be yours to carry. But hear me. Not every burden is your assignment. Some loads are meant to be surrendered. Some fires are not yours to extinguish. There are battles that belong to the Lord, and wisdom is knowing the difference. Do you recall the words of the Master who said, come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest? That was not boutique rhetoric. That was a divine transaction. He invites you to bring your burdens, not just for relief, but for realignment. He is not asking you to ignore the weight. He is asking you to exchange it. What God offers is not escapism. It is empowerment. Become the offense of. And empowerment does not come from pretending the burden isn't there. It comes from knowing who to give it to. Even nature teaches us this principle. The eagle does not flap frantically against the wind. It spreads its wings and rides the currents it cannot control. Likewise, when you allow God to take over, You position yourself to soar up the chaos rather than drown in it. You move with a kind of divine rhythm. Neither rushed nor delayed come the offensive, but perfectly aligned with eternity's timing. Too many are fighting invisible battles with earthly weapons. Become the offensive. They are trying to heal spiritual wounds with physical distractions. They are attempting to calm the storm with logic, forgetting that some storms are designed not to be solved, but to be still by the voice of God himself. You cannot fight divine battles with human strength. You must tap into a power that is greater, older, deeper than your intellect. And that power is accessed through surrender. Letting God take over your worries is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is the refusal to be crushed by what you were not built to carry. It is the humility to say, I am not the source of my strength. I am not the author of my destiny. I am not the architect of my salvation. It is the audacity to believe that you are supported by hands you cannot see but can fully trust. Worry, my brothers and sisters, is not merely a feeling. It is not some harmless pastime of the restless heart. No, it is an internal confession of misplaced allegiance. It is a spiritual declaration, though often unspoken, that the cause surrounding you is more trustworthy than the God who promised to never leave nor forsake you. Worry is worship in reverse. It is faith inverted. It is hope gone wrong. And in that silent struggle of the soul, we begin to understand that what we meditate on, we magnify, and what we magnify, we serve. You see, the human mind was never designed to operate in a vacuum. It always leans in one direction or the other, toward faith or toward fear, toward peace or toward panic, toward divine trust or self-reliant anxiety. But one must always take the throne. And the tragedy of our time is that many have unknowingly crowned their fears as king. They wake up each day rehearsing their insufficiencies, reliving past failures and forecasting future disasters. And then they wonder why joy escapes them, why purpose evades them, or why peace feels foreign. It is not because God is absent, but because fear has become too familiar. What is worry? If not the mind building temples to problems that have not yet occurred? What is anxiety if not the soul bowing before an altar of uncertainty? Become offensive. We often speak of faith as though it is only active when things are going well, when the sun is shining and when the doors are opening. But true faith is forged in the furnace of fear. Become the opposite. It is not the absence of worry that defines the faithful. It is the decision to direct that energy upward instead of inward. For every second you spend dwelling on what might go wrong is a second stolen from what God might make right. The spiritual reality is this soul. Worry is not passive. It is active misalignment. It is the soul's attempt to assume the role of God. When you worry, you become the judge, the offense of the jury, the forecaster, and the controller of all things. You take on a divine posture with human shoulders, become the offense of, and then collapse under the weight of a burden you were never called to bear. There is a pride hidden beneath panic, a belief that unless you figure it all out, it will all fall apart. But let me ask you plainly, is it not possible that the God who designed galaxies, who orchestrates seasons, fence off, who paints sunsets without fail, is also capable of managing the details of your life? We have been taught to solve before we surrender, to plan before we pray, to act before we align. And in doing so, we train ourselves to trust the noise of our logic over the whisper of divine wisdom. Worry grows where worship ceases. And when we feed our fears with our thoughts, we fertilize them with our imagination until they grow into giants we were never meant to face alone. But when we worship, truly worship, we recalibrate. We place God back on the throne of our consciousness. And suddenly the problems, though still present, shrink in the presence of perspective. Think of the Israelites at the edge of the Red Sea. Before them, the impossible. Behind them, the enemy. Around them, confusion. But in that moment of terror, what did God say? Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Not run, not worry, not panic, but stand still. Divine intervention is often hidden in divine stillness. And you cannot be still when your mind is sprinting toward catastrophe. Philosophically, Worry is a flawed form of anticipation. It imagines a future disconnected from divine guidance. Become the offense of. It assumes that the next chapter of your life will unfold with author's involvement. And so you start writing with trembling hands, erasing the promises God has written with ink of eternity. But every page of your life, even the blank ones, is under his authorship. The script may surprise you, but it will never confuse him. Psychologically, worry creates a loop, a self-reinforcing spiral. You worry, become the offense of, and then you worry about worrying. Your body tenses, your breath shortens, your thoughts fragment. You become a captive to a reality that hasn't even occurred. That is not freedom. It is a prison without walls. But faith, faith breaks the loop. Faith interrupts the spiral. Faith speaks to the storm and says, you may surround me, but you will not define me. Faith tells your mind, become the offense of. You are not in charge of the outcome, you are in charge of the alignment. It is often said that what you focus on, you empower off. And so, I challenge you, what are you empowering in your life today? If your thoughts were seeds, what garden have you grown? Have you cultivated peace, or have you fertilized fear? Have you watered the promises of God or the predictions of doom? You cannot reap joy from the soil of panic. You cannot harvest peace from fields of dread. You must be intentional what you allow to occupy the throne of your inner world. So let us make a shift. Let us convert our worry into worship. Let us take the time we would spend over-analyzing outcomes and use it to thank God in advance. Let us replace the question, what if offense wrong? What if it goes wrong with what if God is already making it right? Let us remember that fear is a liar, a professional exaggerator, but God is truth. Come the offense of, and the truth says you are not abandoned, you are not forgotten, you are not without help. When you let God take over your worries, you are not ignoring reality, you are reinterpreting it through a higher lens. Not the offense of, you are not pretending the storm doesn't exist. You are acknowledging that the one who walks on water is in the boat with you. And if he is in the boat will not sink. You may feel shaken, but you are never forsaken. Permit me to speak plainly. One of the great doxes of life is that clarity often comes striving, but through surrender. We will live in a generation intoxicated with information, obsessed with certainty, and addicted to control. We are taught to be decisive, to plan thoroughly, to never let go. But life, my friends, is not a machine that yields to control. It is a divine dance, the offense of. And those who insist on marching to the rhythm of fear will never hear the music of God's voice. It doesn't. The also of letting God take over your worries is not the abdication of thought. It is the elevation of thought beyond self. When you are burdened with anxiety, your mind becomes like a fog capable of reflection, but clouded by condensation. You can no longer see reality as it is, only as your fear distorts it. Worry has a way of shrinking the soul's horizon. The offense of it reduces your world to the immediacy of panic, blinding you to divine perspective. And when the mind is clouded, decisions become reactions rather than responses. You move not by insight, but by impulse. You speak not with wisdom, but with awareness. And you live not with direction, but with desperation. Become the offense, but truly surrender. Something shifts in the spiritual dimension. You create space for divine wisdom to intervene. The surrender is not a pause, it is a posture. It is the alignment of your will with God's will. It is the conscious decision to say, I do not have the full picture, but I trust the one who sees the end from the beginning. And in that moment, what was once blurry becomes clearer. You begin to discern not only what to do, but when to do it. Timing, you see, is part of divine strategy. But anxiety does not respect timing. It only demands immediate action. That is why you must quiet the noise before you can hear the direction. Become the onso. There is a kind of clarity that cannot be accessed through intellect alone. It is spiritual clarity. It comes when your soul is no longer at war with itself. It emerges when you stop striving to control the outcome and begin to trust that the outcome, even if unknown to you, is not unknown to God. You begin to see that the path is not always laid out in neon lights. Sometimes it is revealed one quiet step at a time. The offense of. And you cannot take the next step with confidence if your heart is there to fear. Let me go deeper. Surrender is not passive submission. It is strategic release. It is the wisdom to know when your effort becomes interference. Sometimes the offense of, we prolong the problem by meddling where we should be trusting. We delay the solution because our hands are too busy trying to manipulate what God is already managing. And so we pray, they will be done, but then proceed to act as if it all depends on us. That contradiction is the breeding ground of spiritual confusion. The offense of, you can't hear divine instruction when your mind is dominated by internal chaos. The offense of, the voice of God is not absent. It is just often drowned by the volume of our fears. That is why scripture says, be still and know that I am God. Not just know in your head, but know in your spirit. A knowing that settles you even when the situation is unsettled. This stillness is not inactivity. It is intentional inner quietness. It is the space where wisdom finds you. In that stillness, you begin to see what matters, what doesn't. It turns off what needs your attention, what requires your release. When God takes over, the fog begins to lift. Suddenly become the offense of, you realize that what once seemed urgent is actually relevant. What once felt like a crisis is actually a classroom. Off, and what once looked like a closed door was a redirection to a better path. But you cannot recognize any of this until you have surrendered control of the steering wheel. Divine clarity demands that you loosen your grip. Philosophically speaking, surrender requires humility. And humility is the foundation of all wisdom. Come the offense of. It is the admission that you are not the sole architect of your destiny. It is the realization that you are a co-laborer with the divine, not a lone builder without blueprints. The ego resists this, of course. It tells you that surrender is weakness, that giving up control is foolish. But the ego does not know this. It only knows performance. It only knows exhaustion. But the soul was created to rest in alignment with God. And only in that rest can true vision emerge. Let me speak now to the heart that is weary from overthinking. You've analyzed every angle, considered every consequence, drafted every plan, and still the worry remains. Why? Because clarity does not from calculation alone, it comes from connection. Because when you are connected to God, gain access to a wisdom that surpasses understanding. The offense of, you stop leaning on your own insight and begin walking in divine foresight. You make decisions not based on pressure but on purpose. That kind of clarity cannot be found in textbooks or algorithms. It is found in surrendered silence. And so the question becomes, the offense of, are you willing to surrender? Not just in word, but not just in prayer, but in posture. Come the offense of, are you willing to lay down your right to control and pick up your responsibility to trust? Because in the final analysis, the greatest clarity you will ever receive is this, that you are not alone, that you are not forgotten, and that your future is not a mystery to the one who formed you.